All right, well, welcome to the Poetry Box Live. And I'm Shawn Aveningo Sanders, and I'll be your host for tonight's show. For those of you not familiar with the Poetry Box, my husband, Robert, and I started it several years ago when we lived in Sacramento, and we used to host a monthly poetry show there. And then we moved up to Portland, and we started producing anthologies, started our journal, The Poeming Pigeon, which has just come out with its 10th issue. And we've been publishing about 20 to 25 poetry books per year for the past couple years. So we started the Poetry Box Live to support our poets who aren't able to read in live bookstores right now. So we're excited to be able to do this, and we'll go ahead and get started. Wendy Colby is the daughter of Joan Colby, the author of The Kingdom of Birds. Joan was a talented and prolific poet who was also an avid bird watcher. I was first introduced to Joan's poetry and love of birds in our first Poeming Pigeons anthology. Joan had published 22 books and was the editor for Future Cycle Press before succumbing last month to her sudden diagnosis of cancer. And we are very grateful and honored to have Wendy reading on her mother's behalf today. So please welcome our first reader, Wendy Colby.
Thank you, Shawn, and good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Special thanks to you, Shawn, and to Poetry Box for inviting me to this special Zoom reading today, and really for the honor of sharing some of my mother's poems with you from her latest collection, The Kingdom of Birds. As some of you know, and as Shawn just said, my mother passed away suddenly in August, just 6 months after my father's passing. She was writing poems until her very last days, scratching them out in a notebook. I would type them up for her at night, and I was amazed at how in command she was of her craft. No crossouts, no edits, the words chosen really exquisitely, the lines perfectly in place. And she even meticulously checked my work and to make sure that everything was correct. As Shawn said, my mother loved birds. She had bird feeders everywhere outside of her house, an old farmhouse built in 1874 on a parcel of land in a town called Plato Center. And interestingly, the town was initially founded with the name Homer. Such were, I'm sure that wasn't lost on my mother, and such were the wonderful surprises in this rural area where she spent more than 30 years of her life. She did love the Greek philosophers as well. And I like to say that sometimes I still go to her house to feed the birds, as I'm sure they are lost without her. So I'll share now a few poems from her book, The Kingdom of Birds. Hawks. The female red-tail lurks high in the maple. Her mate soars low over our roof. She takes wing to join him, gracefully hunting some small creature with a pounding heart. How beautifully the raptors cruise November skies, like crosses dipped in blood. The rust-red semaphores warning of their imperial presence on shifting currents, catching the updraft to rise as high specks that hurtle earthward, where beneath the frost a field mouse huddles in its tunnel. We are attentive to blood, to what happens before our eyes, the little judgments that ground us. Two gulls. Walking the sun down like professional mourners into its beer of water, two gulls, one dark, one white, angle low along the cold wind, sweeping white caps over a threshold of rock, a woman tidying her house for night. The stars come on like lamps. The gulls settle on the beach, plucking bread from stones, their beaks quick and certain. They ride the swells, sleeping while we sleep, suspended in blackness, little and alone, snugged to our planet like fleas in a heaving vastness. The gulls wake us strutting at dawn into our dreams, cocksure and hungry. They grab and gulp the rind of everything, coming near enough almost to touch, but wary, measuring us with their shiny nail-head eyes, scoff and seize our scraps, flap heavily into the air and veer to a cairn of black rock, out beyond the breakers. The next poem is dedicated to her friend Kay Panfield, who I remember as a child and who lived two doors down from us. The painting of a pheasant, which you'll hear about in this poem in a moment, was done by her husband, and it still hangs in my mother's farmhouse. Pheasant, for Kay. The fat cock iridescent as taffeta, its scarlet eye patch, purple throat, green skull cap, brilliant copper breast fluted in black, small autistic amber eye posed against an imaginary snowbank. Flimsy shrub dangling 3 torn leaves, corn stubble to the right, and overall a layered lowering sky, infusions of presentiment. Later, the cat absconded with its plucked carcass. We laughed, such a minor deprivation. The painting was completed. You were still alive then. Exercising the thoroughbred in an October meadow, a pheasant flushed beneath his hooves. He reared straight up as if seized by the rapture, then came down sunfishing. I stayed on, like everything, mere luck. Fall morning shotguns echoed, flapping awkwardly out of cover into the sheen of death, into the soft retrieving mouths of dogs, particularly bred. For years vanished coyotes, we heard, or some disease. Then in yesterday's snowstorm, ornate as the one in the painting, a cock marched down our lane with strict military measure, a lone soldier of fortune, leaving its Trinity signature. I haven't forgotten you. Kay Panfield, she died of pancreatic cancer when she was 39 years old. This next poem is about my mother's father. She later told me she knew he had left this earth after the bird smashed against her window and she found it on the lawn. Again, you'll see here the beautiful metaphor of birds, and her father, as some of you may know, was an intellect, photographer, and engineer, and a great influence on her life. Flying against windows, 1. I wake to wings crashing into my window, repeated fury of tiny claws, beak, mirrored antagonist of our sleeping house. Tirelessly, a feathered fist slams against my dream. Here it comes again, kamikaze obsessed by the gods of reflection. It wants to liberate itself. You say I'm being silly. This happens every spring, assault of birds. I shut her face down into pillows. My father, 1,000 miles away, lies hooked to the machines of living death, his heart beating its feathered quest across darkened glass. 2. Later we find the robin in the grass lying peacefully, wings folded, eyes staring endlessly without blinking, like my father in his coma. The next poem has some of her requisite humor, a little different from some of the others here, called Wild Turkeys. The wild turkeys bustle around our campsite like a congregation awaiting a sermon, restless and seeking, like ants preparing a holiday dinner. Oh, irony, how often turkey, the brainless white domestic variety. These turkeys are trim and active. They roost in trees like librarians overseeing the stacks, the tents in which sleepers turn, bagged in butchered dreams. The turkeys peck the leavings of campfires. They hurry here and there in composite identities. There's something knowing and canny in their small bright eyes. Ben Franklin insisted the turkey should be the national bird, but even the proponents of the exceptional prevailed. The modest turkeys plunder beneath the picnic table, sweet and audacious as chatty neighbors who relish gossip, but are never unkind or predatory. With an apple, construction paper, and toothpicks, a child creates a turkey. It is a centerpiece for celebration. How people can come together in gratitude. The wild turkeys so trusting, so oblivious in this protected forest, like nuns in an abbey gathering for vespers. This next poem is one of my favorites in the collection, perhaps because I too am a bit of a dreamer, sometimes preoccupied, always thinking about something else. Maybe you are too. One red-winged blackbird. Yesterday's snow set a record for November. One red wing at the feeder, fluffed against the cold. The flock left in September for sunny resorts in Mexico or Costa Rica. The bird huddles as the feeder swings its copper hood. How did he miss the migration? Was he distracted, as so often I am, thinking of something other than the task at hand? Perhaps he overslept when the flock rose as one decision and lofted off on a south breeze. There's always one who is preoccupied, a dreamer contemplating the poetry of a cornfield, gleaning the easy pickings of the left behind. When the flock ascended like the rapture, this one failed to sign his wingtips against the cloud. In this next poem, the setting is the library, another place I remember well, the Gail Borden Public Library, where my mother was a patron for many years. And one of my favorite memories as a child with my mother was going to that library, and every week she would take out more stacks of books than she could carry. But this poem is not about a library, it's about bald eagles. Bald eagles. On the riverbank by the library, eagles can be seen fishing above the dam, white helmets flashing in the pale January afternoon, a light snow falling. Last fall, we viewed eagles soaring above the Mississippi, crucified on such a blue palette our eyes burned. Watching eagles has become an industry. You signed up for the expensive tour and saw no eagles, just an abandoned nest in a dead tree, but that was something. On the Great Seal, the eagle holds 13 arrows and an olive branch. In its beak a scroll, E pluribus unum. You can see an eagle on the backside of every crumpled dollar bill. The eagles were endangered. Some blame hunting, some loss of habitat, some DDT. It's always something. Today, the eagles are flying and diving over the Fox River. Fish like scrolls dangling from talons, and the word is hunger. The word is blood. Lonesome dove. Every morning, the owl-like query requisitioning sunlight. The tree's long division finds them wanting, a negative number, a fraction of hurt. Gray as Quakers on a quest for illumination to the lawns of those just waking. We are troubled by their petition, how they ask but never answer. We don't know either. This equation that suspends logic. It's querulous, patient, as a monk at the prie-dieu, waiting to be blessed with understanding. That morning means mourning somewhere for someone. Mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, morning. Fugue with two crows. It is a morning in late winter, two crows alight on a topmost branch, unkempt as old trappers, their black ragbags clutched like stolen money. 3 months hard freeze, today a thaw. Further on, the river croons beneath its lazy coverlet of ice like a revived baby. It shakes a rattle of bone, abandoned child of cannibals. Every roof looses its frozen tear, so much pent-up feeling. The snow has grown ancient and gray with it. The crows overlook landscape, plunderers, looters. The windows of ice are cracking on every lake. The small fish cruising in gangs, learning the sense of grab, the rule of blood. How the willows bend into jigsaw water like native women whose sons wandered off, lured by the river goddess in her sinuous and fitful bed. A harsh cry stabs through the trees, stupor. The crows flap off into the sleep that begins its downfall of needles. What heavy birds, sad black hearts. The hinges of their wings seem to groan like the rheumatic branches. Even my eyes ache with the freight of their passing. Eulogy for birds. Grace note birds whirl in a puff of wind scattering over bare-armed trees to reflock along the rusting eaves. Distractions wheel me out of the glass eye into a web of dust. I am a clatter dangling from the nerve strings like thin-paned chimes telling a blown story. When I go back remembering some pattern of black feathers and quick beaks, I blink into vacant air that collapses on grids of houses squared by hedge or fence, embraced by curvilinear streets that wiggle nowhere. Spirit creatures. Wolf and raven are my amulets, loose in a dark wood, one howling, one cawing, hoarse, aggrieved, guttural with hunger. Blood on the moon, head thrown back, neck hair serrated as the long agonized cry splits the shadows where the raven croaks and flaps, a silhouette of ragged wish. Snow on the peaked roof of a cabin deep in pines where the lost children flee like everyone abandoned, like everyone terrified, as if the wolf or the raven were simply emblems, as if every story did not hinge on choice. Parrots. I'm to inherit the parrots. I've committed to the room where friendship has been caged for half a century. In the chair you bend over, staring at your shoes for weeks while the hole in the macula heals, as if gut shot you quiver, the birds squawking in protest. Built of titanium and steel, I cause entrances to clamor, knee wired to extinction. How did we arrive in this chamber of scalpels? We agree to burn the letters, embellished with a cursive children won't master. Their names like pickets. Nothing flows between the oar sweep of descenders, the flourish of signature. Now we punch delete, embrace the technology of symbols, dancing on the screens like birds of rapture. The parrots used to scream when the phone rang. You'd hide in the kitchen whispering, we promise never to judge. One parrot after another dies. You weep, sweeping up the feathers. How can I keep birds that could outlive us, birds that speak? The gray one says, I love you when he sees your face beyond the bars. Does he know what that means? To me, a stranger in the citadel of birds, the memories like shining trinkets. The parrots clamp their beaks on the golden wires. And this next poem too, to me, hits right at the heart. My mother, an only child, who always said she wanted a sibling, but that aloneness, that power of observation, I think gave her one of her greatest gifts. Sunday birds. A fledgling in the grass, perfectly still, staring skyward. I think of moving him, mowers later, a whisper of fluff. But he's fully feathered. The parents shriek and circle, so I reconsider. His sharp nail eye finds me, a sudden get this, and he launches up onto an oak limb. A celebration of robins. Was he their one and only? Like me, the designated child, genetic carrier of all their hopes? A big hawk over the pasture mobbed by crows. One aligns on his back, the red tail flashes as he soars. The crows don't falter, harrying him off into the higher reaches of his empire. So size and farsight can overcome the fury of the uprise. Peasants in ragged black cloaks, limited in intention. You have to admire the way they peck him. They'd hang him upside down like Mussolini. They'd dance and clap in the bombed out square. For now they are content with herding him from his lawful territory, a black crew of murderers. I can't decide whose side I'm on. Two more. This next poem is from her latest book, The Salt Widow. I thought I'd include one of those in here as well. The Salt Widow was really her final book, a memoir of grief for my father, which she wrote in the space of 3 to 4 months. And this poem, another red-winged blackbird appears. And this was written after my father died when she was alone in the farmhouse. Red-winged blackbird. The first redwing is at the feeder this morning, hauling spring northward, singing his territorial hymn. The juncos will be leaving. The cardinals who cohabited all winter will start dueling. Last night the dog woke me barking. The power was out. I heard there was a white flash when the substation blew, but I didn't see it. By morning, the house was cold. Every day is predicted to be warmer, as is the custom. I expect exceptions. Our first child was born in mid-April in the midst of a blizzard. The stats still stand. When I let the dog out, an abbreviated formation of Canada geese go honking over like a traffic jam. Their old migration stalled years back when they discovered retention ponds. Soon it will be the equinox, the time of change. And I was that child born in the April blizzard. And I read this last poem here, another favorite for me in the collection, simple, true, urge can be everything. It's called Nesting. Every year, cardinals persist in raising their young in the lowest furrow of a spruce. Along the road's edge, the lark has laid its clutch too close to the verge. Eggs in the mailbox, upon the lintel, in the graveled lane. Birds refuse to learn. We, on the other hand, have forgotten that urge can be everything. In summary, I'll say before my mother died, she held this book, The Kingdom of Birds, in her hands. And she always said she communicated best through poetry. She felt this book represented some of her best work. She called it her beautiful poems. In contrast to her last book, I also have it here, The Salt Widow, which was the memoir of grief to my father. One of her last dreams, she said when she was dying, that there were birds trapped under her bed. Could it have been her own body trapped? And later she said she was at peace and she felt like a bird ready to soar. As Shawn said, my mother published now 25 books of poetry in her lifetime and leaves a treasure trove of over 10,000 poems, and I'm still finding jewels everywhere, as I hope you will too. Thank you for your time. My mother would want everyone's words to soar. She'd like that. She's up there somewhere watching, I think now, with that keen nail eye of the birds in her poems watching. So thanks to you all. Thanks, Shawn. And I'll turn it back to Shawn.
Oh, thank you, Wendy. That was such a treat to hear your mother's poetry. And you did a beautiful job reading them. And I too, think that her poems will live on for a long time, not only on the page. All we have to do is look up, hear the bird song, and know she's with us. And she was such a special lady. I wish I had more time to have gotten to know her better, but I really cherish this book and her poems and her brief friendship with me through email. And thank you so much for sharing this with us.
And I know she valued that too, Shawn, so thank you.
Our next featured poet is going to be Christopher Bogart. Christopher Bogart is the author of 2 recent books, Breakpoint and The Eater of Dreams. He was also one of the winners of our first Poetry Box Chapbook Prize in 2018, with his moving collection chronicling the tragic journey of the Yuma 14. Chris is a retired educator and a working poet and writer with an MA in creative writing from Monmouth University in New Jersey. He's also working on his MFA. His poetry has been published in Voices Rising from the Grove, Spindrift, Westward Quarterly, and the Monmouth Review, among others. Please welcome Christopher Bogart.
Thank you. I'm also going to ask Cord Moreski, who's a poet from New Jersey, young poet from New Jersey, who has a few of his own books published. I asked him here tonight if he could help me with 2 of the poems from the first thing, so I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yep.
All right. What I'm going to do is first of all, the thing behind me is the great cover that Shawn's husband designed for this book, which my son keeps on saying every 5 minutes. You better thank him for that. So what I'm going to do is first of all read the end of the introduction of this book. Breakpoint is my response to the Trump years and the last few years, and to the division that this country now faces. The last paragraph of the intro: in the face of this threat to who we are, we can no longer be silent. To be silent, to do nothing now, is probably the greatest existential threat to the future of American democracy, our democracy. It's a silence that we can no longer afford. That's what this book of poetry is about, to help to break that silence. So I'm going to start with the first poem, A Past of Promises, and I'm going to ask Cord to read it with me.
Okay, cool. Okay, so you want to start? A Past of Promises. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Robert Frost.
America began as a land of promises, promises for all mankind. But these promises have not yet ripened, green fruit that has not left the vine.
We hold these truths.
These truths began with borrowed language, historic language, precise and strong, but we chose to exclude so many, millions we left to bring along.
To be self-evident. To be self-evident.
As evident as these truths might be, they were not obvious to all. For few, benefits were immediate. For many, benefits would be long forestalled.
That all men are created equal.
But not women. They were considered chattel. Not African slaves, they were property. Not native peoples, they were seen as savages. Not Asians, not part of our posterity.
That they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life.
Life, the inalienable right to live it long and live it well, with all the benefits of modern science for as long as each on this earth shall dwell.
Liberty.
Freedom of speech, unfettered press, to hold beliefs without duress, to work, to earn our daily bread, be free from fear, danger, and dread.
And the pursuit of happiness.
A part of happiness is health, a part of wealth, prosperity. But wisdom needs much more than words. It needs total equality. America began as a land of promises, with fruits of freedom for all mankind. It's time now for those fruits to ripen, to reap the harvest, to make the wine. And this book of poetry is divided into pairs. So this is the past, and the next poem, which I'll be reading by myself, is called A Future of Hope. My dream of a place and a time where America will once again be seen as the last best hope of earth was said by Abraham Lincoln. When the lid of the sealed jar, Zeus's jar, was left by Pandora carelessly, all of the evil Zeus had hid there flew out to plague humanity. Left only with hope, the one thing trapped within the jar, we learned to fight poverty with generosity, war by making plowshares from rusted swords, ignorance by pleading truth, and hatred by drawing love from deep within our human roots. For what we learned then, we must learn again, that hope is not abstraction, but positive action, not vision, but decision, providing paths paved with opportunities. Hope raises walls that hate once raised up high, replacing them with fields of understanding. Hope hangs on common cause, craves commitment to common goals. Hope motivates to force the world to learn to be the force of change within us all. Hope floats only on seas of full equality, where each of us is sibling to all others, our sisters and our brothers in one common human family. Hope harbors within its broad shoals the best of all great human goals, of optimism sewn into the seams of all that's good within all human dreams. Hope holds promise that one day soon we'll reach the heavens to touch each shining star, or hope holds nothing if it is left asleep within the jar. The third poem from this book I'm going to read with Cord's help. It's called The Breakpoint. And I just want to tell you what this refers to. Most of you must be familiar with a poem, a picture that came out a year ago this June of a father, 25-year-old father and his 15-month-old daughter, 19-month-old daughter, that had drowned in the Rio Grande River. Her arm was around his neck. She was tucked in his t-shirt, but they had both drowned. This is called, and the book came from this, the title of the book, this is called Breakpoint.
The instinct not to breathe underwater is so strong that it overcomes the agony of running out of air. At that point, there's so much carbon dioxide in the blood and so little oxygen that chemical sensors in the brain trigger an involuntary breath, whether he's underwater or not. That is called the breakpoint. Sebastian Junger, The Perfect Storm. The breakpoint comes after 87 seconds.
Less than a minute after Oscar put Angie ashore, the 2-year-old panicked, jumped into the water, and followed her puppy back home. As the sound of the splash, her father looked back and saw her flailing around in the water.
It comes when the instinct to breathe in overcomes the agony of asphyxia.
He watched helplessly as the current swallowed her up. Frantic, he doubled back, strong arms cutting through currents until he reached where she had disappeared.
No matter how desperate, you never inhale.
He dove straight down into the raging eddies of the turbulent Rio Grande.
Until you're at the very edge of consciousness.
His arms reached ahead through brown, muddy water in search of his Nina Porqueña.
The only thing worse than running out of air is breathing in water.
His fingers found her body and slipped her to safety beneath his wet t-shirt.
When the first breath occurs, most people are conscious.
Her heart fluttered faintly against his smooth chest, then ceased. Her arms went still.
The spasms of breathing drag water to the mouth.
As oxygen in his bloodstream reached the breakpoint, Oscar swam frantically upward in a desperate effort to get them both to the surface.
At this point, the drowning begins in earnest.
Her lifeless body, like a cold baby doll, pressed up against his bare flesh.
A lack of oxygen causes sensations of darkness, closing round from all sides.
As darkness rushed in to replace the dying light, Oscar was forced to face final truth. He had run out of time.
Water floods the lungs, ending all hope of getting back to the surface.
The following morning, 2 bodies were found at the edge of the brown riverbed, surrounded by bottles and empty beer cans. Little Angie was still tucked into her father's black t-shirt, her right arm flung across his cold, wet neck, their bodies locked in deadly embrace.
87 seconds.
The price of dreams. And on a more cheerful topic, The Eater of Dreams is the second book this spring that Shawn published. And I've got the cover in the back because if I do this, you're not going to see it. The last paragraph of this explains what the Eater of Dreams is about. The Eater of Dreams basically refers, by the way, to the freight train that takes 300,000 to 400,000 Central Americans up to the border with the United States every year. It's called the Beast, or the train of death, because so many of them either fall off or are dragged off by drug gangs. Only 40% of those people make it to the border. Many of them are raped, some of them are killed. I have entitled this collection of poems, The Eater of Dreams, to refer in a narrow sense to the poem in the collection that tells of what happens to those whose lives and dreams are chewed up by the freight train known as the Beast. In a greater sense, the title refers to all the obstacles, violent gangs, drug cartels, Mexican immigration authorities, and all the other dangers these migrants face on their dangerous journey north to the US border. Each year, of the more than 300,000 who embark on this journey, only 40% make it to the border. But they keep coming anyway because for them, paradise could just be one more hell away. I'm going to read you 3 poems from this. The first one is called I Dream, and it's based on Walt Whitman's old war dreams. And he writes, but now of their forms at night, I dream, I dream, I dream. Many of these people came from garbage dumps. Thousands of families live on them in Central America. This is the poem. Beyond the fetid outpost, balanced on banks of stagnant streams, beyond flapping soil, clothing flying half-mast, beyond savage nightmares hatched in nests on humid nights, beyond cat heat howling, babies crying, hope dying, I dream. Far from the stench, the decomposing heat, the rise of gaseous steam, from landscapes festered with flies of mierda in piles, from prophecies croaked on black buzzards atop mountains of decay, from lies expressed to babes from the paps of garbage queens, I dream. Off in the night, the screech of steel on rusty rails, a whistle wails where tomorrow is an endless train on the rails of today's, where teenage mothers finger worn thread beads in supplication, where pal Diana hangs her black hair over eternal night. It is there I dream. The second poem is from the middle of the book, poems that talk about the journey north. And this one in particular is a part of 3 different poems that talk about the rape that occurs to 20% of the people on that train, male, including female, children, including adults. Because 2 out of every 5 of those participants on that train are unaccompanied minors. 2 strong hands press me down to wet ground, the metallic tinkling of a leather belt buckle, a fly buzzes behind my ears. The sharp pain of hard blade thrusts into me, then tears as it withdraws. The pop, pop, pop of gunfire fills the air. Why don't they just shoot me? A dull, stiff blade enters my body for the second time, then is pulled out slowly, again and again and again. My head is pressed down until my face caresses earth. Crickets chirp. A single firefly climbs up a stiff, wet blade of grass to the very top, its tail lit with hot yellow flame, only to slide down the blade and then climb up to the top again. Off in the distance, the soft whistle of the fleeing train invades the cool night air. Once I think, I almost see the stars. And the last poem in this book that I'm going to read, and then I'm going to read one more from a book I'm working on, is called Half-Eaten Dream. The first soldier to die in Iraq in an American uniform was a green card soldier from Guatemala named U.S. Marine Corporal Jose Antonio Gutierrez. Before he left for the war, he wrote, "I came from the land far away where the angels live in misery, dress themselves in filth, and eat dreams." This is called Half-Eaten Dream. His name was Tonio. He was one of 120,000 homeless children of Guatemala, el polvo de la tierra, the dust of the earth, when he was 8. Unlike many others, he was a survivor. His name was Tonio. He did what he had to. He stole bicycles, he sold shoe glue, he begged in dusty streets in Guatemala. From the dust of those streets, he fashioned dreams. His name was Tonio. He wrote poems. He traveled 3,000 miles by foot, by rubber, and by rail. He came to our border at 22, said he was 16. He had to. He had dreams. His name was Tonio. He attended high school in California, lived with foster parents. "You're going to be proud of me," he said. "I have dreams. Everyone is going to remember who I am. My name is Tonio." After high school, he enlisted in the Marines. He became a green card soldier, like the 38,000 other young Central American men who wear the American uniform to fight, to belong, to survive. His name was Tonio. He was a child of the street, el polvo de la tierra, and so he wanted to fight for the dust of the earth in Iraq. "I'll give my life if I have to." He had to. He was killed by friendly fire a few hours after landing in Iraq. He was the war's first fatality. He died for dreams that don't die. He died in American. His name was Tonio. By the way, when I wrote this poem, it was 38,000. It's now 64,000. And sadly, this administration is deporting the families of those soldiers while they're still in the field. The last poem I want to read is a poem that for a new book of poetry I'm writing about racism in the United States. And it's a conversation that I'm having at a bar with another white man. And what we're talking about basically is when is this going to change? John F. Kennedy said, "If not now, when?" And this poem is called When. This conversation we're starting here today must not end at the end of this day. Not end with the last hand-lettered sign written some black brother's blood. Not end with the last car burning in anguish. Not end with the last miles marched in frustration. Nor with the last tear shed in stark sorrow over another young black brother's life. This conversation we're starting today must be the start of a brand new beginning, not the beginning of the past conversations, abandoned long before they had begun. Not the same conversation that was set to be settled by abolition, by emancipation, by civil war. Nor even the conversation of commitment abandoned to lies long before it was begun, in the marching, in the jailing, in the shooting, and the dying over 60 years ago. This conversation we're starting today must begin with the one question that has echoed eternal in every black church, from every black voice, from the north to the south, from the east to the west, and from each generation to the next and the next. This eternal question: how long? The answer can no longer be not long. No. This conversation we're starting here today must finally answer this one simple question, one at last and forever, and for all time eternal, with only one answer, and that answer will have to be now. Thank you.
Christopher, thank you so much for that collection of extremely powerful poetry, extremely important poetry, timely. I'm a little speechless, I'm sorry. I've read these poems except for the last one, and they just hit me in the face hearing you read them today. So thank you for that. We do have to keep having the conversation. We cannot stop. We cannot stop when it gets too cold outside or the protests start to slow down or whatever. We have to keep the conversation going, and we have to stand up for our brothers, all of them. So thank you, and don't forget to vote, everybody. You know, Christopher, I really appreciate you tackle really tough topics in your poetry, and it's not an easy thing to do, but you always bring it with a voice of compassion. And that's something that I've always really appreciated about your work. So thanks again for sharing with us today. And thank you, Cord, for reading those poems with him. That was a real treat to hear that in the two voices. It really worked well.
Thank you.
Our final feature tonight is going to be Kaja Weeks. Kaja Weeks is a poet, essayist, and classically trained singer whose writing contemplates music and healing, as well as identity through multiple generations. She is the American-born daughter of World War II refugees from Estonia, with her poetry weaving new strands of universal themes of ancestry, displacement, migration, and one's sense of self. She is also a clinic-based music educator in Maryland who engages young children with autism to their earliest communications with playful singing. Her theories on development and early musicality have been represented in keynote addresses and scholarly journals in both the US and Canada. It is my pleasure to welcome Kaja Weeks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here this evening or afternoon, depending on where you are. And so grateful to Poetry Boxer's co-founders, Shawn Aveningo Sanders, the great managing editor, and also to Robert Sanders for, among other things, his impressive book design covers. So this is the book that he designed the cover for. And I also wanted to thank Michael Huang in Estonia for his beautiful photo of the Estonian forest and sea. And thank you so much to everyone here in the audience who came tonight to hear all of us. So the title of my book is Mouth Quill, Poems with Ancestral Roots. And the term mouth quill comes from my ancestral language, Estonian. And mouth quill is suu de suilg in Estonian. It's a poetic symbol for the singer's magical tool found in old runic verses, such as in the line, tooge mulle suu de suilge, siis mina laulan linnukeeli. Bring to me my mouth quill, then I shall sing in the voice of birds. So some of the poems are going to include some Estonian words. In the book itself, those things are in the notes, but here, if it's not translated right in the poem, I'll give you a heads up first before I read the poem. So to begin, in the first poem, Saaremaa, Pärnu, and Liivimaa are the names of places in or near Estonia. Ancestral journey beneath ice sheets. My ancestors migrated forward in time, but I migrate backward, back to the Baltic ice lake, melting, overflowing with spectacular rivers of waterfalls. Through a chink in cosmic space, I enter, dive below refrozen melt. Beneath ice sheets lies land mother will call home, and I will plummet to find my origins. My imagination lacks the capacity to go back as far as the Silurian time, when this Northland lay at the equator, before everything broke and shifted, though it flows through my dreams like annihilation at the edge of time. I will anchor to these instead. Saaremaa Island will emerge from a crystalline basin, crushed remnants of sea life adhering to her granite cliffs. Pärnu will appear like a miracle on a bay, sailway to Saaremaa by summer, ice crossings meters deep by winter. Just south, Liivimaa's thawed sea waves will scatter amber at our ancestors' feet. In the next poem, Maretta and Vaike are women's names. Little Songbird. Maretta's melodies, old Vaike's visions, all these I carried, fragments and whole. Lives conjured into air by sounds that never stop, murmured into history from cradle to byre. Those runic tunes of lost silver beads, snakes, rain charms, and northern stars. When darkness descended, too early and too full, I sang, took flight. In the next poem, you'll hear the word kannel, and it refers to a stringed instrument similar to a zither. You'll also hear a string of words at the end, which represent bird chatter, as it's found in Estonian runic verse. Old tunes on spruce. My foremothers cradled harps of northern spruce in their laps. Their strings form my birth ribs, from which plucked tones rise, cluster, and peal. Drawing air to breathe, I taste evergreen. I am a spring twig, just 6. My melody slips its bent tone below the peak of a modal scale, hinting at heartbreak. But by 12, cattle train wheels on Siberian metal haunt me. Their din vanquishes lyric sound, splitting my chest's veneer. Yet, unbidden, vocal cords quiver, resonate, steal space in my bony frame. Ah, I see, it's not my space, but ancestral, where bird warbles became runic songs. Kukuku, bilili, bakvakva. Spirit sees me, wounded Gunnelwood sweats amber, pulls me, holds me in primeval sap. Coastal meadows. The coastal meadows blaze golden, break blue water, blue sky. A wooden boat nudges through green and purple marsh reeds. Instantly, I am home. I have never been here, but this place settles me, the grassland cradling, as if singing and rocking an infant to sleep. Who slipped this place in me? Was it my choosing, or has it crept unknown? When did it come to quicken my breath, and then supply a resting sigh? I am a refugee's child, daughter of a true native daughter of southwestern Estonia, who grew with her mother's hollow in her heart. I long for the resting sigh she was ripped from, for the sway of reed plumes on her seaward creek. Her stories, a mirage of sounds, and my yearning, gild sight, bending time and space. In the next poem, the word Eesti means Estonia, and you'll hear a longer phrase quoted from a runic verse that translates to sleep come upon the child's eye. Ancestral journey, the Milky Way. Over bog spirits and sacred groves, our songs will enshrine air. But first, in the vaults of time and space, I will begin as the spirit of an egg carried by the sea to Iberia. Here, I will land on a branch of the daughters of Eve and their hunter-gatherer men. As the glacier melts, plants sprout northward, and we will move toward the Urals, threading mountain edges, tundra, and colossal rivers. Through 1,000 summers and winters, some will be left in the river bends, some follow the reindeer north. Some will look heavenward at traces of bird flight, some walk a milky star path westward. Dreams float through moonlit nights, enter open windows, land upon our sleepy brows. Huni tule lapse silma peale. Metrical pulses move our language. First syllables drum the words. Forward until we reach the sea. Eesti. The phrase that you'll hear in this poem are lulling sounds, like in lullabies, and again, found in runic verses, and which I myself heard as a young child. The rise. Mother's lulled notes, old whispers nuzzled my ear on late nights. I could hardly catch their fuzzy edges as sleep took me. Hey, whoosh, whoosh. Mother's mother was born on a farm near the sea, southern Estonia, 1895. Sea gray waves rustle, sleep mists its way from coastal stones, crosses 1,000 miles, falls upon my eye. Song saved me. Like steam from your smoke sauna, my spirits rose skyward, hissing before the rise. Mouth quill. At home, my stroke assaulted mother, you startle and confound me. On my childhood bed, we eye each other. Metallic sounds ring from your mouth, wailing not at gods, but from some crucible of the gods. From those northland winds blow low and rise, they ripen. Your incantation pelts the room, the color of blue sorrow. 1 river, 2 rivers, 3 rivers, more. My voice fails. I fear to go there and utter nothing. I offer recorded purity, nuns singing 9th century Christian chant. Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor. Isn't this your God? No, you smack the music device, and though words have eluded you for months, deep-throated you decree, this is false death, and renew your endless spell. We are so far from singing together. I don't know how to join you. My mouth quill has stilled. Oh, mezi Maria memekene, honey mama berry, emakene helekene, my mother, my dear. Hey you, once you charmed me to slumber on silken nets in this space of braided hair. The next poem, Seabrook Farms, refers to the place where my parents, who were refugees during World War II, came to America, and Seabrook Farms, of the famous Seabrook Farms Frozen Foods, which was the first big frozen foods production place in South Jersey, was their sponsor to come to America, along with other Estonians and many other people who worked there as well on this big corporate farm. Seabrook Farms, 1949. I retrace your shell-shocked footsteps into the new world, but neither prints nor scents endure. Pungent winds rankle vast fields, spinach, peas, and corn, Jersey farmland that absorbed you into their united essence. Like crops squatting in neat long rows, wooden barracks form Hoover Village, where I see you caught in the alley by brutal winds, a pale blue uniform flailing from your waist. A deep tritone whistle blows, harbinger of a 10-hour night shift ahead. You trudge with others, those who fled with you from a landscape riven by flames into the stormy Baltic Sea. The world gone mad with war once more. Forced German labor in exchange for cheating certain Russian death. 5 years in displaced persons camp limbo. Till the blustery voyage on a US Navy ship. Then hauled on the back of Charles F. Seabrook's open farm truck to this rural company town. You mumble home until it rises like a question. I plant my future self in your path, but can't feel you pass through. Please, I can't even be a shadow if I have no object. Not yet born to cruelty or compassion, I don't care that you stand 12 hours at the conveyor belt, falling from exhaustion. I don't care how senselessly day shimmers in your eyes. I will stay and cavort inside your stunned mind until you wake to yourself. But do not fear, Mother. We are not alone. Your starched white hat bobs along with resettled Nisei ladies, sorting peas for freezing, field raked by Tennessee migrants, Estonian boys, West Indian laborers, former German prisoners of war. a motley crew of the dispossessed stitched into a patchwork of America. Gathering Grandmother Mealy. At 6, I only knew you by black dress and serious face, a single armoire photo, a sole relative to us in America, your daughter's final refuge. At 8, I heard your eyes were green, just like my mother's and mine. I calmed in the secret belief this made the three of us soulmates. After her wartime flight, your eyes never met hers, nor ever saw mine. Did you know I existed? At 12, I collected your letters on airmail thin blue paper addressed to your daughter with a coded identity. Creeping up 4 flights of stairs to a crammed office where I murmured, Maria Garro, not my mother's name. After my mother was gone, I first saw a letter in your rounded script refer to little Kaja and wept, your endearment half a century old. I finally met you last summer in Baranu, in a lightly wooded cemetery by a river. My husband spotted you. My son-in-law scraped the stone that declared me. My daughter and I planted white asters tilled with soil from America, from your daughter's grave, and I sang you a song. In the last poem that I'll read tonight, there's a phrase, Murue de Tutret. It's from Estonian mythology, and it refers to maidens of the Lady of Grass. The Songstress, Pine Barrens, South Jersey, in memory of Ellen Barve Valsar. Magical songstress, dressed in linen, a woven currant white belt wrapped 3 times around her waist, the long end falling freely. In darkness she stood alone, spotlit in a field. We waited almost in silence, except for those summer night sounds, crickets, a branch crackle, bullfrogs. When she opened her mouth and high sounds emerged, they were fantastical, glides and leaps upon vowels, singing, whistling, or birdsong. Some were shepherd's calls. Ae, ae. Murue de Dutret came, those sprites whose singing drove animals of the forest to thrive. Mythic images of the yolk and white of a bird's egg washed to shore. Our sun and moon appeared. Thank you, everybody.
Kaja, that was amazing, beautiful. I can certainly see why you were called the little songbird. Your voice is beautiful, and it was really fun to hear the Estonian language. I've worried about all those little accent marks as we were working on your book.
You had to work on all those little dots on top of the O's and where I put lines.
But now I get to hear what it sounds like, so that was beautiful. And the one about your grandmother's grave, oh my gosh, I really teared up on that one. And the mouth quill poem, trying to comfort your mother, just beautiful, stunning work. So thank you for sharing such beautiful lyrical poetry with us today.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Chris, Kaja. You're all fantastic. It's kind of interesting the way all of your books kind of weaved in and out of each other thematically. I didn't even realize that when I put you all together, but it really worked. Thank you all for joining us for our second show of Poetry Box Live. We'll be here the second Saturday of every month at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 Eastern. So I hope you guys will join us again. Next month will be on Saturday, November 14th We will be having 3 Oregon poets this time. We're going to be having our winner of our 2020 chapbook contest, Teal Aisha Ansari. We'll also have Rebecca Smolin, the author of the forthcoming book, Excoriation, and Doug Stone, the author of Sitting in Pals, Watching Burnside Dissolve in the Rain. So if you'd like to keep up to date with all of our shenanigans, go to thepoetrybox.com, where you can scroll down to the bottom of the page and sign up for our newsletter. Again, thanks for joining us today. Be safe out there wherever you are, and we'll see you next month.